Your life can be full of inspiration and magic, and you don't need glass slippers to get there. Welcome to the podcast for real life heroines with author, speaker, and coach, Susanna Liller. Join us as we work with key elements of personal development to assist you in hearing the calls that life has for you. Be inspired, be empowered, and be encouraged. Let's start today's episode with your host, Susanna Liller.
Hi, everyone. I would like to welcome you to this episode of my podcast, the podcast for real life heroines, where I get to interview women who have been on the heroine's journey, who have answered a call that is bigger than they are, that calls them to a wider arena. And in answering that call, they become bigger, they evolve, and they grow. And that's what the heroine's journey is all about. Answering the call, leaving your comfort zone, bravery and courage is involved. And you're really going to see that. Oh my gosh, you're going to see it in this episode today. You're going to hear it or see it, depending on how you're listening, with Catherine Ann Wilson. And Catherine Ann, welcome. I'm so pleased to have you here with me.
It is an honor. I really appreciate being invited. There's so many of us survivors out in the world. And I know that the more we say, me too, and share our stories, that unification energetically is just a game changer. So what a thrill. Thank you. And I've been following your work. So I just, it's an honor to be here. And I feel like I've made a friend.
You have so made a friend, totally made a friend. So I want to read a little bit from your website just to introduce you to people. And then I'll ask you to elaborate on anything if I've left out some important details, but sort of the basics. And your website is, why don't you just say that, because I don't have it written down here.
StopTraffickingus.org. StopTraffickingus as in Sam.org.
Great. Okay, so the mission on your website is to educate the public that 1 in 5 children are sexually abused. And I'm pausing to take that in, for people to take that in. 1 in 5 children sexually abused. That abuse of children is the precursor, and you're going to say a bit about this, I think, to sex trafficking, addiction, incarceration, and more. Our goal, your goal, Catherine Ann, is to prevent this trauma and the domino effect of social ills through effective teaching and training. Our vision is to stop the sexual abuse of children. And your little bio here, let me read this. Catherine survived nearly 20 years of early childhood abuse, molestation, bullying, rape, runaway from 12 to 17, and sex trafficking. And just to even read that and look at you, yeah, that's big. Then 20 years of what Catherine calls surviving the surviving. So the PTSD and all of that. Tenacious self-help, personal growth, and ongoing healing through many different kinds of healing modalities. Now nearly 20 years of a life that Catherine says has been beyond her wildest dreams.
Mm-hmm.
So people might find that hard to believe.
Yeah.
Several years ago, Catherine started the 501c3 nonprofit Stop Trafficking US. This was born out of an inner calling. So right there on your website, you're talking about your calling, an inner calling to do everything she could to prevent other children from going through what she did, also to offer hope to victims that they too can heal and thrive. Over the last 6 years, she has done exactly that. A highly respected visionary, creating effective, efficient ways of educating individuals, families, communities, and states. So both of us live in Maine, and you said to me, and it's on the website, that one of the biggest questions you get asked is child sexual assault really, and sex trafficking really happening in the state of Maine? And how do you answer people when they ask you that?
I ask them if there are human beings living here. Because wherever human beings are, drugs are being sold. Wherever human beings are, children are being sold. It's just everywhere in the world. Wherever there are human beings, there is the inclination to be heterosexual, to be bisexual, to be homosexual, to be asexual, to be sexually attracted to children. And it could be young children, it could be pre-adolescent children, it could be just young boys or just young girls or boys and girls. 95% of the population are not sexually attracted to children, but the 5% who are leave a wake of devastation that is just maddening. The average amount of sexual assaults, I will use the word offender and predator sort of back and forth, really depends on who you're talking to. Some people in the world or realm of sex trafficking and child sexual abuse prevention don't like the word predator. They prefer offender. So I might go back and forth, so that just so you know. But the average assault of number of assaults of an offender would be around 150. So 150 for each offender of that 5%. 1 in 4 girls, 1 in 6 boys equates to 1 in 5 children. Some people are blown away by that. Remember Huffington Post maybe 4 years ago saying that child sexual abuse was a pandemic. And I would agree. And there are people who say, no, it's 1 in 10 children. And other people say, no, it's half of the, it's 1 in 2. And I say, if there's 1, it is too many. But the general consensus is everybody feels, in my world, feels safe saying 1 in 5 children. So if you can imagine wherever there's a bunch of children on the playground or a particular camp or summer camp or event, and you look around at the children and you say, oh my gosh, I can't even. Now, yes, it's true. Sometimes it is, there's higher level of, there's more abuse to children of color. There is more abuse of children who are in the system, meaning children who are in the foster care or somehow the state is involved with that child's life. It is higher in those cases. But the truth is, every child is susceptible, regardless of the fanciest family or the poorest family. It really doesn't matter. What matters is access of that offender or predator to get at that child to offend.
And I think that, well, 2 things. One thing, I just want to recognize that there are probably people listening that have had this happen to them. And I know that you have sensitivity to that, and you have said that you're happy to share your story. Sometimes it's hard to hear the details. I think that if you could help us by sharing how this happened to you, maybe not in real detail, I think the point that people will want to hear particularly is how you extricated yourself. So sort of to lay out, how did you, from a good home, end up being trafficked in the end? Yeah.
So what I would say is, in order for an offender to offend, right? In order for a child to be sexually abused, 3 things need to happen. The first one is you need to have someone male, female, regardless of age, regardless of color, regardless of financial status, regardless of anything, except for one thing. That person needs to be sexually driven for a child. So they need to have the inclination to abuse. And there's a lot of research on this, and I'm going to simplify it because I need things to be simple. So usually the person who has this inclination is someone who has been sexually abused themselves and they're passing it down. This is where many times where children, older children, are sexually abusing younger children because they are being or have been sexually abused. Sometimes it is just a grown-up who is turned on by kids. And people are indeed, in fact, born with a sexual inclination for children. Like, how come some people like tall blondes, or they like short, dark hair, or short? It is a preference. It's just a preference. And these individuals have a preference for children. All right. Second thing, they need a vulnerable child. Yes, there are greater vulnerabilities if they're in the system, if they're in a single parent situation, fill in the blanks, right? And again, I will say all human beings on this planet are vulnerable. Period. And I have had people argue with me on this point and say, hey, this is a man, this is a proud dad. This was in Maine, in Lincolnville, when the governor had the governor's summit on human trafficking. And I was getting ready for a bodybuilding competition, and I was hitting the gym instead of having breakfast with people. And the manager of the gym was saying, what are all these people doing here? And I said, well, this is a summit on human trafficking. And he just, it was only me in there. So he felt open and comfortable. And he was like, there's no way that happened to my 12-year-old daughter. She's a tomboy. She's tough. She plays sports and she's bulletproof. In his mind, his daughter was safe and did not need any sort of protection or education because, she loves her dad, him, and it would never happen. And usually I'm kinder than I was in the moment. But in the moment I said, so there's a huge hill, to the resort. And I said, you mean to tell me if a predator took your daughter aside and said, your dad drives that blue GMC pickup that he always parks by the front door, that if you don't do something, a sexual thing with me, that I'm going to cut his brakes, he will die as he's going down the hill, unless you do this. I was a little more graphic than that, but you get the idea. And his jaw just like fell open. And I'm like, under the right circumstances, and these offenders, like, they know about jail time. They know this is illegal. They are typically organized. They actually send scouts if somebody's being prosecuted for child abuse or child pornography or any of these things. They actually send scouts into the courtrooms to find out what the laws are being used, what works, what doesn't, and they share the information. Like, they've got this down. They know what's at risk. They will either use love or something about love or fear to coerce that child. So the dad was sort of set back, and I'm glad. I had another woman tell me, oh, thank you, Catherine, you've taught me so much. And because of you, we have told our 5-year-old that if something doesn't feel good, to come and tell mom and dad. And I said, that's great, Lisa, but what if it does feel good? Can't even tell you how many men have disclosed to me that when they were in scouts or they were in some sort of club for little boys, that a camp counselor or someone did something to them sexually and they had a sexual response. They had an orgasm. And for decades, they just felt like their body betrayed them. They questioned their sexuality. I mean, just sent them on a tailspin because nobody told them when they were a little boy that that's perfectly natural. That doesn't mean anything. It's just biology, you know. So there's so many people who suffer needlessly. So those are the three things. Somebody who has the inclination, a vulnerable child, and then the thing that really is the thing where we have so much power. We could stop so much harm with just this one thing, and that is access of a grown-up or someone who has a sexual inclination to a child. Like, we have so much power, and the Boy Scouts have done a great job, understandably so, with their training. You can't text, and Sunday school teachers, you can't text one child. A grown-up can't have this relationship one-on-one. There
Right.
has to be a second person there. There's no sleepovers with just, you know, a priest and that none of that happens anymore. You
Wow.
have to keep everybody safe. And when you prevent that access, that opportunity, because we know that the sexual inclination of an individual is not based on anything other than the inclination. So it can be a coach, it can be a priest, it can be a leader, it can be, you know,
And
wherever human beings are.
right. So how did this unfold for you?
For me, it was an administrator in my school. So my mom and dad were happily married, very much in love. And I was the firstborn child in the family. So I was just warmly welcomed and wanted and received with love. And then my little brother was born shortly after I was, and he was very, very sick. I'm 57, so 50 years ago, a long time ago, the medicine for asthma was not as superior as what we have today. My brother's first 10 Christmases were spent in the ICU unit in an oxygen tent. They would come and tell my mom and dad, he's not going to make it through the night. He did, but boy, early on, the medicines would have him hallucinate. He was just a very sick little boy.
Right.
And what a great opportunity. That's why I told you there's three things. So the school administrators knew what was going on. They knew that, my brother was really sick. Everybody knew. And the school administrator would come and take me out of class in first grade and bring me into his office and sexually abuse me. I was his special little girl back before, that was a red flag title. And after that, as is common when a child is sexually abused, I akin it to blood in the ocean with the school of sharks. There is just something that happens, and actually Harvard has studied that. I don't know if they come up with the answer, but like, how come? Like, is it a pheromone? Like, is it the way the child behaves? They did 2 women who had been raped. One woman had been raped, one woman hadn't. The odds of the woman who had been raped to be raped again if she was jogging Central Park was like significantly higher than someone who had never been raped before. So for me and many others, the domino began. Even though I was in a middle income family, even though my mom and dad loved each other, there was that opportunity for access that looked legit to the outside people looking in. Well, the administrator, of course, the family and, all that. And then it was the babysitter. And then it was an uncle and an aunt and a friend of the family. And it was sort of, from a child's perspective, it was just something that happened to me a lot. And it was just the way it was. And now I'm behaving differently in school. And I have chickens here in Maine. And if I have a new baby chicken, Betty, and the other kids, the other chickens don't like Betty, and they try to kill her every chance they get because she's different, you
I
know?
know that's the whole pecking order
It's the whole
and it's not pretty, right?
right. I just like, please. And it triggers my my elementary school years, and I'm like, I'll protect you, Betty. So Betty's been in the house like most, like I have a house chicken anyway. So for me, I was being bullied, and for me, bullying, and you had talked about some of this stuff in the beginning for me, and it's true, like all the awful things that have happened to me. And I'll tell you, bullying was right there, man. That bullying was awful. And I was bullied horribly at school and became promiscuous as I got in junior high. Um, the boys were nice to me, the girls, weren't. They were awful, and the boys were only nice to me for a moment, that sexual moment, and they weren't nice to me the rest of the time. So I started running away, and I ran away from 12 to 17 years old. At first, it was, a couple of days, and I would go to a family. I wouldn't say any of the kids in school were my friend for the reason I just said, but
Right.
they would say, you can come and live here, whatever. And when a child goes into a home and that home doesn't call your parents or the authorities, it's usually because you've just been thrown out of the frying pan into the fire.
Gee.
And now it's a big brother, an uncle that's living with them, a stepdad or a dad who's waking me up in the middle of the night with a hand over my mouth, dragging me out of where I was sleeping, off of the couch, off of the guest bed or whatever, into a hallway or bathroom, utility room. And who am I going to tell? I'm a runaway,
I bet there's people listening thinking, well, how come she didn't tell anybody? Why didn't she go to her parents? Why? And so why?
Well, in the big, I didn't go to them about the school guy, but I did go to them for a babysitter, and that babysitter just stopped being my babysitter.
Yeah.
And then the other people, this is in the 70s, and there's family dynamics, right? So in the 70s, it was uncool to be a homemaker. So there was a lot of pressure for my mom to go to work. So she's starting to go to work and feel a little independence. Remember that Charlie commercial? I can
Yeah.
bring home the bacon fried up in the pan and never let you forget you're a man.
I do remember it.
That was the 70s, right? It was about women power, and the women were really being they were sort of being bullies themselves, and like it was a shame if you were just a homemaker. So she's leaving, and she's trying to make my dad modern, and my dad doesn't want to be modern. He's happy the way he is. And mom finds another man and leaves. I think I was 13 or something, and my mom and dad get a divorce.
Yeah.
And then the other dynamic was my dad was an electrician, and he worked on the Yankee power plant. And from what I was told, there was a radiation leak. Dad had some radiation on him, and back then they had him use a special kind of soap, take a shower, put his clothes in a bag, and they told him to go home and wash his contaminated clothes in hot water and he'd be fine. What we didn't know until later was that my dad, when I was 17, he died of malignant melanoma.
Yeah.
My dad had cancer from the top of, it's a very slow growing cancer. And so what I have chosen to believe is that what I'm about to tell you next is because my dad was
Covered
from head to toe in cancer, and he died within like 3 months once he was diagnosed. So my mom and my brother and sister went to live with her new husband, and I'm the oldest, and I'm a caretaker kind of person, and I love my dad. I think that my dad is God, at the time when I was a little kid, even though all the bad stuff is happening at school. I'm being sexually abused. My mom and dad are in their own little world, going through a divorce. My dad was absolutely devastated. He was madly in love with my mom. He was a mess. And I say, I'm going to stay and take care of my dad. I believe, again, that it was the cancer on his brain, right? So just allow me that. So now I'm sitting on my dad's lap to give him a kiss goodnight. His mother moved in to be support. And I remember my grandmother saying, don't wear your nightgown in front of your dad because your dad is a man. And I thought, no, he's not. He's my dad. I thought that was like the weirdest thing that she could say, like, ew, right? Now I'm sitting on my dad's lap. He has an erection. I'm waking up in my bed. He's in my bedroom staring at me. He's asking me to ask women to have sex with him. It got very bad. He's sharing. I'm like laying on the shag carpet watching Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom or something, like a kid does, on the couch, on the floor. And he gives me a magazine, and it's the Forum pornography, and it's a story about it's okay to have sex with your dad.
Oh gosh.
And so I know that I'm not safe at home. So I'm not safe at school. I'm not safe around my peers. Men only like me for a minute. And now I'm not safe at my home. So now when I run away, I don't go to stay with people. I stay in empty forts that I find in the woods. I stay in apartment buildings that I could break into, an empty apartment building. There were some condos that were under construction. I slept there. I was arrested for shoplifting a towel at the Dillard's department store because I wanted to take a bath. So
You're how old at this point, Catherine Ann?
14, 14. So at 15, I am, and I'm leaving like a ton of stuff out, but at 15, I am not menstruating. I am so malnutritioned that I've stopped menstruating. I am malnutritioned. I'm starving to death. And and I didn't do drugs or alcohol. So that's another myth, that people who are prostituting themselves are doing it for drugs. I'll tell you that people who are sex trafficked, their pimp is giving them drugs as another way of control, and also a way of keeping them. Can you imagine having sex 25 times a day? Like, even if you like totally love the person, I mean, really, like, no, never mind a stranger who's disgusting. They could have bad breath. They could have bad body odor. They could be rough. They could be mean. They could be whatever. I remember being prostituted. I was trafficked to a fancy hotel. I don't want to say their name in Portland, but it was a fancy hotel in Portland. And other girls were supposed to be there. There were 5 hunters, and the other girls didn't show up. And the 5 guys didn't care that it was just me. And I was 16. They just, I'm 5 feet now. So you imagine just a short little 16-year-old that they're tossing around, and one guy liked to bite, and the other guys had to, it was through my skin, and the other guys had to make him stop biting me through. So I understand why drugs or alcohol would help somebody be able to do that. My constitution, just even today, I can't do Tylenol or Novocaine, or if I could have numbed out at the time, I certainly would have, but I didn't. I remember every awful thing that was ever done to me. So I'm
So
15, 16 years old, and I'm in this bad place in Biddeford, Maine on Pike Street, like this awful place, in this apartment with a drug dealer. And he's doing just awful, very bad, painful things to me. And there's a couple of girls, and I was in a basement apartment, and there was a couple of girls in the second floor. And from my perspective, they were superstars. I mean, in my mind, they have their own apartment, they have food, they have clothes, they looked happy, they had each other to talk to, they weren't being held prisoner. And so, I would talk to them, and they fed me macaroni and cheese with peas and tuna fish in it. And I felt the food hit my bloodstream, and it was just euphoric, you know. And they were like, you could have your own apartment, and we have boyfriends. And they didn't say prostitutions, pimp, and you're going to be enslaved. They really made it sound glamorous. And they had me at feeding me. They had me at feeding me. And so I was whisked away to a place. I don't know if it was in Arundel. I don't really know where I was, but in a very rural place with other girls and a guy and a house mother. And this woman, the pimp, has this lady watching us. And you're not allowed to go anywhere, do anything. It's and you are sold like you are, if you're the reason why prostitution and sex trafficking is so lucrative. I mean, it's $150 billion. It's the largest lucrative criminal activity in the country. You buy a drug to sell a drug, you have to buy it and transport and sell it. And once that drug is used, it's gone. But you can take a human being. A drug sniffing dog isn't going to notice anything. You're a human being. You can move the human being all over the place, which they do. You can sell that human being over and over and over again, which they do. They actually get more money for the girls in Maine. So when the pimps come in, the scouts come in to get new meat, they're looking for girls who aren't covered in tats, that have that wholesome look, that they get more money for them. And there's all these different ways that they can lure girls into being trafficked. For me, it was food. For somebody else, it could be fear. You're either going to perform and be mine, or I'm going to go after your sister, your little sister. Big sisters will usually do anything to protect the little sisters. So when we look at girls who are prostituted, the average age is 12 to 14, and 89% of those 12 to 14-year-olds have been sexually abused before. So sexual abuse is, as you mentioned earlier in the precursor, is the precursor to not just sex trafficking, but so much.
So I think we need to hear how you got out.
So the getting out, I'm going to give you the Cliff Note version, and I encourage your listeners to go to the site and hear the whole thing, because I love this story so much. Just, sometimes in life, regardless of what's happened in your life, you can look back, and they call it connecting the dots, where you look back and you go, wow, at the time I'm so sorry that I didn't get that job, or I wasn't accepted into that college, or I didn't, I didn't whatever with that guy or whatever. And you look back and you go, boy, if I had, this whole other thing wouldn't have happened, And so I look back
that all the time. Yes.
Right. And I just look back and I go, wow, God is pretty cool. I mean, I think the whole free will thing is crap, but I love the good that can ultimately come out of really bad things. So for me, the escape was a God job. I had heard, I don't know if it was the pimp or if it was, I don't know, the house mother or somebody, they were talking about somebody down the street. Where they kept me was very rural. It was like a country mile before the next home. and we, like we didn't talk to the neighbors, and I wasn't allowed out of the front door unless I was getting into the car to be sold somewhere. In the backyard was a bunch of just land property. And so I vaguely remember them talking about somebody who had recently gone to AA or something. And it stuck in my mind only because my dad's best friend at the time, my whole life, he was in AA. And he would tell me when things were bad at home, he'd pull me aside and he'd say, the AA program can help anybody. It doesn't matter that you don't drink. The steps can help you, and so he was trying to talk to me. And so when they were talking about AA, that just sort of was in my brain. Mm-hmm. So lots of bad things had happened, and I had been choked to unconsciousness. I had been beaten. I had been brutally raped, just awful, tied down. The most horrible things. There was a warrant for my arrest because back then they didn't have missing person. Like they have like the Amber Alert and stuff now. They didn't have that then. So there was a warrant. If you see this person, we want her. And my pimp had brought me to the Biddeford police station, walked me in. I went to whoever the sergeant or whoever, and he was a bad guy. And okay, you're all right. I can say that I talked to you. And then my pimp walked me out.
Yeah.
So I am not safe. I want to die. And seriously, like I really wanted out. If there would have been a button I could have pushed, there would have been no hesitation. Just really like, I'm done with this planet and human beings are bad. I want to go away. And so I went out in the back and with the trees and I said, okay, God, if you're real, I just sort of spoke out loud and said, I don't know if you're real. I don't know if hell is real. And if I commit suicide, do I go someplace worse than what I'm experiencing now? Because that would suck. Right? And I don't know if reincarnation is real. And if reincarnation is real and you commit suicide and you got to come back and like, it's going to be worse, that would suck too. But I don't want to live. So I felt really stuck. Like I was afraid to make a permanent move, like death. But I really, really didn't want to live. And so I said, if you're real, help, help. That was it, And I don't really know. Part of trauma is timing. I lose time. So I don't know if it was a day or two or a week. But what happened was I had the bravery. So I don't know who out there, maybe their parents spanked them or put the fear of God in them. And they absolutely, even if nobody was looking and they were told, don't touch that water bottle or you're going to be grounded or whatever motivated you to absolutely not touch that water bottle, that's sort of a brainwashing. So pimps brainwash you with such awful things that I don't even want to speak it. Mm. And I was brainwashed with unspeakable horror that kept me in line. He did not need to be near me for me not to walk out the front door. I was not going to walk out the front door. But after that conversation with God, I walked out the front door. I walked out the front door, and then it was, my brain is spinning with, okay, if he pulls in the driveway now, because I felt like he was Satan and incarnate, or a demon or something evil, and that he could see me even if he wasn't around. Like somehow he would magically know where I was and kill me, or actually not kill me. It was way worse. So I was like thinking of what I would say if he pulled in. And then as I walked further down the road, and I didn't want to run because that would draw attention. So I'm just walking down the road. And the first house that I came to on the left, I knocked on this door. And when a woman cracked open the door to see who was at the door, I shoved my way in and went inside of her house. And I told her what was going on. And she said, instead of calling the police or my parents, again, so you look back and you go, boy, as a grown up, I would totally call the cops,
Right.
right? I mean, I would anyway. So she didn't. It just so happened that she was going to a place called a Crossroads for Women in Windham, Maine. It's a 30-day rehab place, and where she was going the next day. And so she called, and they said, bring this kid with you. It was for 18-year-old women who were alcoholics. I wasn't 18, I wasn't alcoholic, but I went. And that night I laid underneath her guest bed, terrified. And then the next day her husband parked the car sort of wampus or sideways. And I got on the floorboard of the back seat and went to Windham that way. And I did find out later on that the pimp did go out looking for me, and somebody was shot, and it was, I was merchandise. I was an ATM, and he wanted his ATM back. Mm-hmm. So I went to Crossroads for Women, and they accepted me. And not only did they let me stay the 30 days, they let me stay 90 days, which was just crazy that they did that. But it was a life-saving moment for me. And then the next life-saving moment was my dad calling. There's a place called Day One for Kids in Maine. It's a 1-year program. Your first 30 days, I think. Is that right? Your first 30 days, you're not allowed to go anywhere by yourself. You can't check the mail. You are attended. And again, I'm giving the Cliff Note version. And the kids have to vote if you get to live there or not. And so the kids were like, well, we'd like you to stay here, but we're afraid you're going to have sex with everybody. And I was like, how about if, you don't rape, sell, or torture me, and we'll get along fine. So they said yes. And the next day, I was supposed to check in for the 30-day no contact, and then I'm there for a year. And that evening, and I didn't tell my parents, I didn't tell anybody where I was. I did let people know that I was safe, but that was it. And my dad called and said, I love you, I need you, please come home. And he had said that before, and I knew how he needed me, and I wasn't in any hurry to go home. But something inside me, like an emergency broadcast system feeling, like emergency, you have to go home to your dad. You must go home to your dad right now. Just this inner thing. Yeah. And I went to the night nurse and I said, I don't know what is happening, but I need, and my dad's in West Palm Beach, Florida, and I'm in Windham, Maine with no money and a pimp out there somewhere. And so she called staff, and the staff said, don't stop her, don't help her. And it was the right people just came together, and somebody gave me a ride, and somebody got me to Massachusetts, and my grandmother got me on a plane, and I got to be with my dad. And when I arrived in West Palm Beach the next morning over breakfast, I see my dad's forearm, and it looks like somebody stuck a half of a hard-boiled egg right above his wrist under the skin. And I said, Dad, what is that? And he said, it's cancer. And I said, have you been to a doctor? And he said, no. My dad died 3 months later.
Wow.
With me by his side. And one of the single most important moments of my life to this day was being with my dad the hours before my dad died. And when he died, there was a spiritual event that happened that became my spiritual mooring that kept me on the planet for the rest of my life. And I would not be here and I would not be who I am if it wasn't for that spiritual awakening with my dad as he died.
Well, what a road to get there. What a road to get to that place. So, Catherine Ann, there's so much more to your story that I want you to be able to tell to people. And particularly when you, after the 20 years of you recovering, you were, recovering from the first 20 years and all the work you did to get to where you needed to be emotionally, physically, everything. And the wonderful job you had, the 6 figures job. I mean, you were successful in the world of work. And so then you began to look for volunteering opportunities. How could you give back? And you went to the jail. And can you just share what happened there?
Absolutely. Your first 20 years is enduring the abuse. And then the next 20 years, as I mentioned, I couldn't tolerate drugs or alcohol on the street, nor could I tolerate antidepressants, anti-anxiety medication. And I had acute post-traumatic stress disorder. So the 20 years after the first 20 years was really about healing. And we hear about healing and the healing journey and all that. And I will tell you that healing works. It takes a ton of time, and nobody tells you that. It just takes a ton of time. It just takes a ton of time. And, it had been 12 years since my last panic attack without any medication. It's meditation and healthy living and all this stuff. And then jobs, going from one job to the next job and just learning skills. I never went to high school. So it was following my heart and doing what you have to do. One of my jobs was cleaning houses. Another job was cleaning up poop in people's backyard. Another one was taking care of old people. Another one, just whatever I could do. And then taking classes and getting certifications and growing. And somebody gave me an opportunity. I was trying to get into the ministerial program. I did 2 years of the prerequisites. I'm doing hospice care as a nursing assistant. And then I just met somebody who was in sales and he owned the company. And he's like, I want to give you a shot. And the other owner said, she's white trash. I'm a commission. I'm not going to pay her anything. We're just going to give her commission. Next thing you know, I'm like the top producing salesperson in the country. Just crazy. And I made, $12,000 a month, and I bought a house in Maine on a little lake, and took me like 4 years to believe that I actually owned it. Just like walking in going, is this real? Am I going to wake up from this dream? It was so many vision boards and meditations of what I wanted my life to be, and healing. Oh my gosh, all the different ways of healing. And it works when you work it. And then I'm, 47 years old, and I want to be able to give back. I'd always given back, like feeding the homeless or, whatever. But my doctor, Marcel Pickett, at the time, had said at Women to Women, said, I heard that, we have a jail in Maine for kids. And that was not my thing. There's no way I would have gone to jail or done anything with kids. I mean, I didn't get to be a kid. I'm so glad I have raised 2 successful children, but that was like so hard. That was not my choice. But I felt like sometimes when things cross our path, it is to teach us something, even if it's to teach us no, even if it's to teach us boundaries, even if it's to get clear on what we don't want. There are still, if something crosses my path, I believe it is a divine meeting and there's a gift in there for me. So I decided to go. And all these years that, 20 years of pain, 20 years of healing and growing my career, my past was on a need to know basis. I didn't share, I was not open, I was not talking about my past for almost 50 years. If I was dating you, if you were my bestie, I might tell you that I was raped to explain why I would jump if you came up behind me. But I didn't go, spent so much time and money in therapy. And then there was a blackmailer in my head saying, if that boyfriend or your girlfriends really knew all of your stuff, they wouldn't want to have anything to do with you. So even though I had done all the work, there was still that sort of blackmailer narrator in my head. So but I believed my doctor, and I'm like, okay, this might be a divine meeting. And I go to jail and I go through all the background checks and the whole thing. And the first interviews is meeting the volunteer coordinators and them asking you questions. And I had made a vow going in with God. And I'm like, if I can be of service, I'm so grateful for my life. I'm just going to speak through me, and I'm just open. And they asked me questions about my childhood. And I just, for the first time, I just told the truth. I didn't hold anything back. And the reaction was surprising to me. They were crying, and I didn't understand why they were crying. And I found out later they were crying because they rarely got to see a happy ending. They rarely got to see, and that's so sad, but over half of the kids don't make it. I went on to do weekly groups there under Beth Peavy, who is the manager of the girls unit. And the girls that I had, it was such a huge blessing and a gift for me and for them. There's a special, you can be a therapist and a social worker and all that, but there's something unique about somebody who's already been there. And the girls were able to really bloom and open. And we did lose some of the couple of the girls overdosed. Couple of the girls are success stories that I'm really proud of. But boy, happy endings are rare with kids, and we need to change that. But I started doing that, and when I did that, I decided that I needed to tell more people in the state of Maine. I'm like, okay, if this is still happening 35 years later, what's going on in Maine? I believe in human beings. I believe in the spirit. And I thought, boy, if the people of Maine, the true abolitionists that they are, if they are not like all over this like white on rice, it's because they don't understand. And if people just explain to the 1.3 million people what's really going on, then they will rally, and we will have a huge healing. We will have a huge healing in our state. And that started a 7-year, really tenacious undertaking of educating as many people as possible. And I mean, I would be Rotary all over Maine, law enforcement, all these people, and they would not know what sex trafficking meant. So we would start with that, like, what is the difference between sex trafficking and prostitution, and is it really going on here in Maine? And it was heartfelt. Let's have a conversation about that. And I'm in my one room little she shed office of love here in Standish, Maine on Spago Lake. And it is just amazing what God has been able to do through me and through the people who follow me. Like, it's crazy. 2 years ago, I was invited to the White House, not like cute little girl from Maine, let's give her a tour, for her good work, but it was, hey, we want you to come and sit at this table in the Roosevelt Room with 40 other people, and we want to hear what you have to say about sex trafficking and child sexual abuse prevention. Please come prepared to share with us what you think is going on and what you think the answers are, because we want to hear that.
I really wanted you to get to this because you had a moment sitting in that Roosevelt room that I want women to hear. And then I think we have to make sure that we say again how people can get a hold of you
Sure.
to make sure that they know and that donations keep coming, because in order for you to do all this education, you have got to have money. So,
Right.
but the moment, and so please.
Roosevelt Room. Okay, so the Roosevelt Room, this was, and I know that the other women and probably men too have had this. You know, you just sort of feel like a fraud. I don't know. I do. Like, I'm thinking, boy, if you guys are listening to me, or if God's using me, we're in trouble, right? There are people who are like way more educated, have way better skill set than I do, you know, but I just keep trying to do the best I can and, you know, keep moving forward. So the White House, you know, you get this email from the White House asking you to call them. And I'm just like, is this even real? And it said, you know, wh.gov, you know, whitehouse.gov. I'm like, oh my gosh. And we had just finished the 3-day child sexual abuse prevention conference in Portland. Like we had just finished that. I raised $25,000, brought in national speakers. We educated like 300 people, I think, not a ton, but it was my love offering to the state of Maine, and I was exhausted. So I was headed up to Eustis when I get this email from the White House, and I pull over because you lose reception up there, and I call the number, and it's Giovanni is her name, and she's, you know, very clear, was so kind, and she was like, you need to fill out this stuff, and it has to be perfect, and blah blah blah, and you can't make a typo. Like the Secret Service is gonna like send you this info. We have to do a background check before you come to the White House, and it has to be perfect, because if it's not, you're not going to be let in. And I'm trying to be cool with her on the phone, but you know, I'm doing one of those football dances, touchdown dances. And I told her, I said, you know, I'm trying to be cool with you, but really, like, I'm freaking out right now. And she giggled, and she was really great. So I fill out the paperwork online. Like I wanted to like turn around and go home and like, but I knew I needed to rest. So I went up to Eustis, spent a couple days, came back down. I fill out the stuff on the computer, and I go to the White House, and my husband comes with me, and we're staying in this, you know, the Hay House, beautiful hotel, walking distance to the White House. I'm so excited. And I arrive where I'm supposed to go, and they don't want to let me in, because I said I was born in 1965, not 64. Like total made a mistake. So the Giovanni inside and the security outside, massive security. It was Trump, you know, it was a couple years ago. So just crazy security. And they finally like figured out, and they work together, and there's a guy on the other side of security, and he's like grabs my arm and like, let's go. And we get to the Roosevelt Room, which is one door. There's one door in the Roosevelt Room. You open it, and there's the Oval Office. So you're like right there in the West Wing. So the guy, like, you know, we run to the room, opens the door, lets me in, and I am the only person late. And the old me would have said, you don't deserve to speak. You disrespected everybody in this room by showing up late. It is inexcusable. You should not sit at the table. You should sit against the wall. I think there's like +1s. So they had some spaces against the wall, but I saw my name, this like cardboard thing that says a picture of the White House and my name folded and put in front of the spot right next to a White House employee. And I'm like, okay, I need to sit where they gave me a place to sit. So I sat, and the old me would have said, fine, okay, you sit here. You don't deserve to sit here, but okay, you sit there. Don't say a word. You have not earned the right to share anything. You let go of that right when you showed up late. You don't deserve to speak. So I sat there, heart is pounding. I'm listening to all these people around the table sharing, and no one is sharing what the White House asked. They said, what is the problem? What is the solution? And I'm like, my head is exploding. The fearful side of me, shut up, you don't deserve to speak. And the other side of me saying, you are never going to be in the White House again. Say, you know, speak, woman, speak. And so I just like, I have something to say, you know? And I said, this is a multifaceted problem. And here's what I found in Maine. And I think that we should have John's School. I think we should have services. I think we should have housing. I think that we really need to push education and child sexual abuse prevention. And I go through all my stuff, and then I shut up and I try to breathe, you know, and then shortly after that, it was over. And the people, it's like a BNI meeting or a commerce meeting. Everybody like is exchanging cards and they're talking. I'm trying to breathe. And the lady beside me said, "It was a pleasure meeting you. Would you be willing to be on the council? The president has a anti-sex trafficking council." And I said, but you have to like jump through hoops, you know. She said, it's not easy, but would you be willing to be on the council? I said, absolutely. But I'll tell you that my heart of heart is around child sexual abuse prevention. If you want me on the trafficking, that's fine. But if there's a space, and she said, well, we'll look into that and we'll start the process. And then I think I turned into a puddle. and then I left. So, and the education, go ahead.
What a moment.
It was such a moment. And then COVID happened, right?
Yeah.
So I was invited back again in January for the 20th anniversary of the Sex Trafficking Victims Protection Act. And there was Barr and Pence and Trump and Ivanka. And I had my picture taken with Ivanka, who was just this beautiful woman who had gone to all these different sex trafficking homes to learn more about it. I had my picture taken with her, put that on Facebook, and I was a deluge of horror. People unfriending me, calling me worse than a sex trafficker, it was just awful. And then after that, COVID happened. And then the state of Maine asked if I would do some training with them. And then this last March, this funding came in January out of nowhere. I have no idea even who sent the money. One was $3,000, one was $2,500. And I worked with the state of Maine Department of Education and Safety, and I hired the leading trainers in the country on child sexual abuse prevention and trafficking. And the state of Maine, totally out of the norm. They had never done multi-training before. They had never used an independent person like me before. Because it was paid in full through my donations, there was no red tape, agendas, crazy that we've seen for the last 4 years politically, none of that. We educated 640 state employees, teachers, social workers, and attorneys, 90 prosecuting attorneys. It was a massive success. And I want to do a ton more of that for our first responders. That's the goal.
And you will keep doing it. I mean, anybody listening to this is thinking, this woman, what she says, she's going to do it. So I want to end with asking you this question. So there are women listening who haven't been through what you've been through, but they can recognize, and some who have been through some part of that perhaps, but they can recognize your moments of asking for help, asking for spiritual guidance, the connecting the dots, the getting your courage together, all the things, listening to your intuition to go down to Florida. These are things that have happened to all of us, and I would say to women on the journey. So, and particularly, sitting in that Roosevelt room and that old voice, which on the heroine's journey, we call it the threshold guardians, want to keep you back, keep you small, and telling you, oh, you made a mistake, you're no good. But I have something to say. So all of that, what would you like to end with telling them? They're on their heroine's journey. It's probably different from yours, but it's still that journey to be who you really are, your authentic self, and to have a voice for whatever it is you need to say. what would you say to them?
I would say to write this down. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. We are perfectly imperfect, and so is everyone else. The layers of truth regarding those two statements are profound.
Mhm.
As a spiritual being, we get to make choices, and those choices change the way we feel, the way that we behave, and the way we become a beacon or an attraction to all that is good and abundant in this world. And it doesn't matter if it's not true, okay? It doesn't matter. Like Brian Katie, who would you be without your story? You know, or her, the work, the 4 questions. So when I believe that I am a fraud, a loser, I don't really have anything of value, I'm not as good as I need to be in order to make an impact. When I think that way and I believe that way, how do I behave? How do I feel? Well, you already know how I feel, right? So what if I chose to believe that just as I am capable of helping one?
Mm.
And if my soul's purpose is here just to help one, is that worthy? Is that valuable? Is that super groovy? Yes. So how do I feel? How do I behave when I choose to believe that? Very different. It's that way on forgiving. It's that way on expectation of others. It is that way. What am I choosing to believe? How do I feel? How do I behave when I believe that story?
Mhm.
What is a more empowering story, true or not, that I can choose to believe that would change the way I emotionally feel, because we're electricity, and I feel good, and then good is drawn to me. That, and it doesn't matter if it's true or not. I'm not. I don't have the skills, and I don't have, right? Like I did that 3-day child abuse conference. I can't do a dinner party, but somehow the people magically appeared who did have those skills, and we had a 3-day conference.
Yeah.
Somehow the money came. Like, I don't even know where the money came. The money didn't come before last January, but the money came in January for a conference that I didn't even know was possible, a virtual training for the entire state of Maine in March.
And because of COVID, because you had it virtually, you probably got a lot more people there and educating more because it was virtual.
Totally.
Catherine Ann, I need to thank you so very much. And I know that there's so much more to your story and more that you could tell us, and more. I mean, I need the education, we all do. So to go to your website is stoptrafficking.us, and to also hit that donate button and make sure that the money keeps coming. So I know your plan is to continue and maybe take this to other states and just keep educating and educating. So
we're working with the state. Well, I'll be meeting with them in September, and we're going to do another training. A lot of our first responders in Maine are traumatized, vicarious trauma from what they see, and they're bringing it home. So we'll be doing a training for first responders on how to help them with their own trauma so that they don't quit and become a part of the problem, but we can keep them educated, empowered, and supported. So that will be another $6,000 worth of training. But my husband is kind, and I don't have to add money to the family. So every penny of donation goes directly to the training. So it's 100% goes to stoptraffickingus.org. So if there's dentures for Survivor or another training for Maine state employees. Every penny of every dollar goes towards that, not overhead, not me.
Great. And if someone's listening and they want to know more in particular from you, or to ask you to come speak to their event or whatever, the best way to get a hold of you is how?
They can email me, Catherine@catherinehelps.org. You can text me. They can text me at 207-752-4226. You can get on my website, however you want to, whatever you're comfortable with reaching out. We are working on, got a team now working on on the website, a course on sex trafficking in Maine. So hopefully that'll be done in the next month or so. And we'll also be doing a journal for women to help them process and remember who they are.
Yeah.
So working on all these different little things to be a good citizen of Maine.
Yeah. Well, you are a good citizen of Maine and a good citizen for the heroines on the heroines' journey. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here with me today and sharing this not easy story to tell, I'm sure. And we'll be in touch. I'm sure that there'll be a time when it'll be great for you to come back and tell us more about how you're doing with your success story.
I will look forward to telling you the success story.
Okay, well, thank you. And thank you everyone for listening to us today. Yes.
Thank you for listening to the podcast for Real Life Heroines with Susanna Liller. We're so glad you've joined us and would love to connect with you outside of the show. To find more about Susanna and how she can assist you in your heroine story, go to susannaliller.com/blog or find us on social media and YouTube by searching Susanna Liller. You can also email us directly at susanna@susannaliller.com. We'd love to hear from you. To be encouraged and inspired outside of the show and blog, check out You Are a Heroine, a retelling of the hero's journey written by your host and coach, Susanna, available on Amazon. Until the next time, be well, heroine.